can't do negative today. Positive vibes. Positive vibes.
One day I hope you see the truth. This puppet show stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's fun, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with liars and abusers. Need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.
Let's go to my first commercial, and we're going to bring on Justin. Welcome, Justin. How are you?
I am happy to be back as usual.
Awesome.
In the cyberspace flesh.
You sorry, what?
I said in the cyberspace flesh.
Yes. I mean, look at what we can accomplish. This truly is some technology we can actually see and use. I'm really starting to wonder about a lot of technology, like how they cannot coordinate the traffic lights, that you can go 20 feet and there's a traffic light that changes right in front of you, go another 20 feet. And we got all these cars with their engines running, but they're screaming, oh my God, pollution, climate change. And it's all of their making, but I digress. Talk to me about, there was a person on your last show that decided to call you out. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to answer, and then we're going to move on to a subject that's near and dear to your heart, because you will be running for sheriff next June, I believe it is.
Absolutely.
So go ahead. The floor is yours.
So, and you had actually sent me the email. There was a little bit of back and forth because at first I didn't understand what you were saying. But essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, someone had commented talking about how local governments are supposed to operate, because I was talking about that kind of specifically, and I use an example of the town I live in, spending money before they essentially had the money. So my rebuttal to this individual, I think I know who they are, but I'm not going to name them anyways. It's basically, this person was defending a position of a town spending money before they actually have the budget voted on for the year. And it's a situation where your budget works one of two ways. So you either follow the calendar year, which is January to January, or you follow the fiscal year, which is July to July. As far as I'm aware, my town follows July to July. So their defense to that was that they were just spending money for a budget, because my criticism is my town thankfully voted that down. It was a lot of increased and, in my opinion, wasteful spending. Mm-hmm. And their defense was, well, we were spending the money in accordance to, what we're allowed to do and stuff like that. It's not so much what you're even allowed to do. It's what you really should be doing, which is my entire point then and now, where if you don't have money voted on, if you run a business, if you run your home budget, any budget that's fixed, you don't outspend your budget until you know what it is. So Correct. If you don't know that the money is actually voted in by your constituents, by the taxpayers, that's one of those things. It's not very responsible to start spending it. And then because you have overspent and that budget doesn't pass, now you cut things. They're claiming, I know that our town government here, my direct example, claimed they didn't cut anything when in fact they did have to cut it because they had already exhausted too much money for the year. So I wanted to clarify that specifically, and it ties me into the next piece, and it's probably the drum I beat the most, because everybody wants a better president. Everybody wants better federal government. Obviously, the list of issues with the federal government right now. You could go around the earth a couple times with that, but that's the stuff that is kind of outside of our control. I don't ever want to be defeatist and think that, we have no impact on that, because you kind of do. But the real impact that you can have is right in your community. That starts with being, a good neighbor, being a good person that knows what's going on around you, knowing your neighbors, being involved in your community, even if it's not political, be involved and know what's going on, know people, because that's the base of everything. If we actually get back to being better, having more civic responsibility and just kind of being more of a community, a lot of these things are going to go away naturally, just because that's how it works when you actually work as a tight-knit community. But the local impact of your select board or your library treasurer and all these things that most people don't really pay attention to, you have to pay attention to them now, because they're impacting you in ways you never thought. As a child, I didn't really know what was in my library necessarily, but I don't think that any adults were campaigning to put books that depict, sexual things in them. That was not even a conversation. It didn't matter where you were in the political spectrum. Those things were tolerated.
Correct. I agree with you 100%. And the other thing that I don't think was an issue, and I'm older than you, we never had to worry about them, librarians, selectmen, councilmen, whatever, your local government, taking your property taxes and spending it willy-nilly on whatever they deemed the flavor of the day, flavor of the month, without ever asking us, which is, projects to the federal government in a bigger way, i.e. taxpayer money going to Ukraine. We never voted on it. I didn't know we were at war. I digress. But it's the same whether you're at the top or at the bottom, and we need to be involved at the grassroots, at the bottom, in our schools, in our town government, in our library. We need to know what our local DOT is doing. We need to know what roads are being fixed. We need to know who's coming into our community. But yet somehow that's become taboo. And God forbid you show up at a town meeting or a school board meeting and say, this is what the Constitution says. You cannot spend the money on this, this, and this. And if you do, it's got to be voted on. You're a Nazi. You're a child hater. Every name under the book. I've been called every one of those. But yet,
yeah, me too.
I'm a taxpayer, and you're telling me shut up and sit down. Well, guess what? Shut up and get your hand out of my pocket, because I'm not paying anymore. They don't like that, though.
Yeah, and that's the thing I've said many times, because of, what happened over the past couple of years. It is rare for a bunch of people to go to a school board meeting and to go to a select board meeting. And if people are attending those things, I don't want to, okay, let me rephrase, restart. If a ton of people in the current context are attending those things, that means you're not doing what people want, because they're going to it, they're taking time out of their day. That said, we actually should be going to these things because everyone should really know. And that's one of the things that's been the most concerning to me as I've grown older and, owned homes and paid taxes, and especially getting involved politically, is that that's the type of thing that your select board should be thankful when you want to engage in that process, as long as you're doing it respectfully. If you're going there to just mess with people or be disruptive, that's obviously not a productive situation. But people wanting to get involved, and especially, addressing their grievances with what you're doing, and most of that comes down to fiscal policy right now, that when that is viewed with going into, closed session and going out of public session immediately and in a suspicious manner, or anytime someone asks you about, especially how a lot of the funds that were doled out for our safety, however you want to phrase that, have been abused and misused. You start asking too many questions like that, and all too often you're seeing select boards having people removed, having them arrested. Those are the things that there's no legal precedent for. Thankfully, now there actually is some legal precedent against it, even though you really shouldn't need an explanation. It's pretty clear what your rights are and what the laws are. They just choose to kind of nuance them to what their needs are at the time. And we need to realize, and they need to realize, they being your local officials, that you're not there as royalty. You're not monarchs. That's not how our governmental system is intended to operate. And it certainly isn't how your local town operates. And those are the things where you can focus on the presidential election next year. That is going to be a mess. It's just, no matter what, it's going to be intense and crazy, and probably a bunch more suspicious, crazy things will happen between now and then. But it's your local elections that are going to dictate who accepts the money. Does your town participate in some of the radical programs that are happening that are being taxpayer funded, or does your town actually buck up, like most are going to have to now if they really want to look out for their citizenry, and really tighten the reins on spending? Maybe we don't get a bunch of money for our school because we're not going to participate in this, and we need to figure out a solution that works for everybody. And a lot of that, honestly, is going to be cutting taxes, but at the same time, you're cutting services. And we need a public that's ready to receive, the education on how to do it properly, to, educate your kids. I know it's inconvenient if you have to watch your kids, but that already happened to you. I don't know of anybody who got a tax refund during when kids got sent home or anything else like that. So when you don't get services, sometimes it is an issue if it's a critical service, especially when it comes to, police and fire department and stuff like that. Education, you can argue, is critical, but at the same time, it needs to perform. All these things need to perform. And some of these changes are going to have to be, I guess I'll say, radical, where, have towns go against the retirement system. Towns are probably going to have to sue against the retirement system so they can fund quality police and fire and teachers and all these things. And it's things we've become accustomed to because they're just normal. When they have been underperforming for a long time already, it just has kind of gone unnoticed or certainly untalked about. But it's going to be critical now because we have a national debt that is crippling. It's like $33 trillion. Correct. We have very reckless spending. We're paying for municipalities in Ukraine. We're paying for pensions in Ukraine. We don't have money for our own communities. I've worked through this as a law enforcement officer where every single year the staffing gets worse. Every single year the training standard gets worse. Every single year you have less good candidates. And it's because of the way we're doing it. We just need to understand the fact that it is going to take some out of the box ideas that are going to probably take some sacrifice by everybody. But if we can have a better return on investment for what you're paying for taxes and keep those from going up, people will embrace that. And we are going to have to accept a little more responsibility.
Yep. And people also need to understand that when your state governor and the executive council, I don't know what it is in other states, but I know what it is in New Hampshire, when they accept federal money, which they're not supposed to do, it's supposed to be the legislature, but when they accept federal money, there are strings attached. And those strings attached generally work against the public, the taxpayer, we the people, and our children. Doesn't work against them, it works against us. And in taking that money, they agree that they will do everything that those strings attached say. In addition, they sign on the dotted line that says, oh, and by the way, for that money you're giving us, the taxpayers will pay you back. Here's the catch. It was our money to begin with. You took that from our paychecks. It went up to the federal government. It came back down. It had strings attached. And our executive branch in our states are signing a dotted line that says, yep, and all those little people, all those little debt slaves, all those little people down there, they're going to repay it. And everybody is blind to this. We've got a teachers union. We have a teachers union that is out of control, dictating from Washington, D.C., under the auspices of the executive branch up there, telling everybody in every state what to do. We've got declining enrollment. We have way too many teachers for the number of students. We're funding that. We're funding their benefits. We're funding their pension. We've got schools that are huge, and we've got communities like mine that want to build a bigger, better school because they want it to be pretty. People have got to understand the only thing government is supposed to be taking care of is with our taxes, infrastructure, defense, and trade. Nothing else. Not the water, not the air, not the education, not the how a truck goes across the road, not where the water goes, not where the birds fly. This is where people have lost their way. They have accepted that it's your right, it's your this. It's not. Your 39 enumerated rights are what belong to you, and they're given by God and are supposed to be protected by the New Hampshire Constitution. And that's all. That is an exact science. But the rest of this, I mean, I'm blown away by the people that want to build a $120 million school, and our kids can't read, write, or compute.
Yeah, it really is incredible. And a lot of that is unfortunately my generation of, I don't understand how they just can't comprehend simple economics. So everybody's going to want a new school. Everybody is going to want a rec center or all these things that sound great, but they're not free. Fixed incomes are difficult to deal with when you have inflationary pressure from goods. And I don't want to go off in an economical tangent on how economics works, I guess, our entire economy. But when you have a fixed amount of money and things go up every year, or they vary no matter what, but right now they're pretty much going up, and for the foreseeable future are going to be going up more exponentially, you cannot do those things. These are the times where we need to stop building and maximize what we already have. Okay, what do we have for a building? How can we get the most out of it? Is the heating system efficient? All these other things that maybe they haven't done them as commonplace. I don't know. I haven't run a town. I've been involved in, being a police officer, but I wasn't paying attention to things like that. That wasn't my role. It was way outside my role. But we need to focus on spending money wisely and not acting like even these federal grants. I mean, the real issue that we have, and once again, this has happened for decades, is our budget is basically, from a business standpoint, insolvent. We have 50% money coming from the feds to pay for educational stuff and subsidize all these things that honestly don't need to be subsidized. And it's used as a way in every state to gain compliance. Another thing about our government structure is we are supposed to be a federal union of states that every single state, that's why we have attorney generals, that's why we have Supreme Courts, because we are essentially 50 countries that are unified under a federal constitution. That's why our constitutions are allowed to be more restrictive than the federal constitution as far as protecting your rights. Mm-hmm. So that's how it's supposed to work. It's not actually treated like that. I know that you are understanding of that. But the more that people suffer, I'm hoping the more that people are going to be willing to pay attention to this, because we can make lemonade out of these lemons. I mean, we're in a really tough spot. It is certainly not going to get better without our involvement and without some positive action. And this attitude of, we'll hang around and either the white hats or Trump's going to swoop in and save us all is not a realistic strategy. If we can have a great president next year, that would be fantastic, and I encourage that. But the real answer is going to be in a mirror first, and it's going to be right in your neighborhood second. Because if we have counties that have enough towns that go against this, and then, the state is not going to just derail the gravy train for no reason. People are going to have to do it. My rep here, the reps in Carroll County, I'm actually very fortunate. We have some great ones up here. I know that Mike Belcher has been fighting about a bunch of stuff. And he actually was talking about, you talk about how the education system in this state and really nationally is just not effective. The rate of return you get is absolutely terrible before you start factoring in the radical, weird sexual stuff. And now they're trying to push into the realm because of that, where we need to offer comprehensive mental health care. And there's so many definitions for that. And it's way too open to interpretation, where we need to just restrict this stuff and honestly privatize education. You know, you need to regulate it to a certain degree. I understand that. So you have actual standards, but our actual standards are not producing a good product. I mean, we're supposedly the richest, best nation in the world. And when it comes to education, we can be, you know, less than 50th percentile in a lot of things.
I think I think I heard last night we're either last or next to last in the world for education and academics.
That is way worse than I thought it was, and I thought it was pretty bad. But for the amount of resources and wealth and opportunity that we have here, that's inexcusable. I mean, we do actually have the best house in a bad neighborhood when you're talking on a global scale. And just like every other country, our people are what make it important. You know, our government is terribly corrupt right now, and sometimes that trickles down to your local town. I'm not accusing most local towns of being bad actors or nefarious or anything else like that. I do think there's a lot of ineptitude. I do think there's a lot of arrogance where they just want the importance of a title without the responsibility of what that title is supposed to come with. But as far as how nations operate is usually not reflective of the ideals of the actual voter base. And that's the stuff we need to start being vocal about. I mean, we don't need some civil war type situation. We need people to just start paying attention and say no, vote with your wallet. These type of things are what creates the change. I mean, I think it was Larry Fink of BlackRock said it's their job to force behavior change through monetary policy, which is essentially dictating through a bunch of, you know, nuanced government of fascism. You know, it's forcing you to do certain things. It's shutting your bank account off. It's the CBDC stuff, and that's a separate conversation. But a lot of people talk about why I get into all these different things when I'm just a sheriff's candidate is because it's one, you need to know that stuff just for your own personal success, because the world is going to get dicier and dicier as this progresses. And two, I don't have a sheriff's office without a budget. I don't have a sheriff's office without quality candidates. You know what I mean? These are things that you need, and we need to be able to pay for them. We don't need to be paying for, you know, Ukrainian pensions and all this other wasteful stuff, and then not having money for, you know, our local issues.
Correct.
Money towards fixing the homeless and drug issue for real, not creating a bunch of money laundering businesses that it will just get worse every year. And then we'll say to people that we're trying to make it better and we'll spend more money. And if we just give more money, then we'll solve it. And it's literally a snowball from hell at this point.
It is. Well, I want to thank you because I've got my second guest here, but I want to encourage you to listen for 5 minutes, because exactly what you were talking about, the forced compliance and fascism and all the stuff that's going on, I think I just fell over their next gotcha. So I want to encourage everybody to follow. Justin, tell everybody where they can follow you.
So currently you can find me on Facebook at Worthley for Carroll County Sheriff NH. You can find me on Instagram, same thing, Worthley #4 CCNH. You'll see this ugly mug pop up and you'll be able to follow me. I make videos to try and go out on this, you know, follow your local media, follow channels like this, because that's honestly the best bang for buck as far as real stuff that's going to apply to you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I look forward to being here again, and I will stay tuned because I would love hearing bad news.
It's not terrible, but it could be, but it's an opportunity for everybody to jump on this. So thank you, Justin, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.